So, today we are talking about nice isn't leadership, how avoiding difficult conversations actually hurts your team. I know there is a need to want to be the nice guy, and a lot of our society is telling us, we want to be the fun leader, we want to be the manager that maybe everyone gets along with, that we want to be happy and more playful with our teams. But there's a difference between nice and kind, which we're going to dive into today. For those of you who haven't attended one of these webinars previously, my name is Megan Wollerton, and I am the owner of Life Force Wellness, and I hold certifications in a whole bunch of things, including health and wellness. And I noticed a pattern in health and wellness and leadership, and that is the behavior change aspect. So, for the last 5 or 6 years, I've really dived into positive psychology, change psychology, stress management, and bringing that into organizations. Now, I did not always work in the health and wellness space. In fact, right out of college, I got a job in the oil and gas field industry. And so I was a service provider in the oil and gas industry. We provided the housing that all the guys live in on the drill rigs. And so that meant being on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because those drill rigs do not stop. And it was a very grueling job. It was a time when Marcellus shale drilling was still very new. There wasn't a lot of regulations around it like there is today. It was kind of like the Wild West. So I was working 60 to 100-hour work weeks on call 24/7, and I completely burned out. So, after experiencing that burnout, I got into health and wellness more to improve myself. And now, what I do is I take all that knowledge that I've accumulated and I'm bringing it back into companies and to leaders such as yourselves so that you can use this to create happier, healthier work environments. And I work with individuals and companies. So, any questions on health and wellness, I'd be happy to answer for you. In case you're not aware, I do run a free weekly webinar every single week, and they alternate between a general wellness topic and a leadership topic. And you are welcome to attend as many of those as you would like to. And you can certainly share our links with any of your team. So let's get into the leadership trap that many of us fall into when it comes to wanting to be the nice leader. We don't want to have difficult conversations, not because we don't care, but sometimes because we care too much. We say things like, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I'm worried it might come off wrong. I'm worried I might offend them. I don't want them to get defensive about it. A lot of times too, you might have a close relationship with an employee and you have to address an issue and you're worried that it would damage the relationship between you and that employee. That was something I know I personally experienced. And there are other times when you have a conflict going on in your department and you just want to step back and go, you know what, maybe it will just work itself out. And these are the traps that we typically fall into when we are trying to avoid that hard conversation. And there's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't avoid that conversation. One of the things that we need to get out of our head is that we want to be the nice one. And I see this with parents with their kids, that there's the parent who's nice and does all the fun things, and the parent that's like the disciplinarian. It doesn't really work there either. Nice is a nice concept, but it's not good in practice. And I see there being a very big difference between someone who is nice and someone who is kind. To me, when I think of the word nice and I look at leaders who are trying to be nice, they're the ones that are trying to avoid the discomfort, right? They're trying to sweep it under the rug. They try to soften the truth that whenever they have to have a hard conversation, they tend to sugarcoat it or they dance around it. They really try to protect people's feelings. They're more interested in how the employee feels versus how the employee performs. And they hope it will improve. Their leadership style is lots of hope and lots of optimism. And they really are trying to prioritize harmony. And I'm not saying that those aren't great things, that as a leader, we want more harmony in our teams and that we want to be respectful of people's feelings. But being kind addresses the issue. And it does it in a way with empathy that we can both recognize, listen, this is a yucky conversation. This is a hard conversation to have. but I'm doing it out of a place of compassion. It communicates clearly. It does not tiptoe or skirt around the edges. It's a lot more direct so that the employee knows exactly what you're trying to get at. And it protects the relationship long term. So I even think about like when I do my personal training, and I'll tell you what, I have clients that have said some nasty stuff to me. I've gotten plenty of dirty looks during a workout. And my favorite thing in those moments to say to them is listen, you can hate me now, but you are going to love me later, right? When you start to feel better or some of that weight comes off or you build that muscle, it hurts now and it sucks now. But in the long term, you're going to be so grateful for the time that you're putting in here. Same thing with these hard conversations. You know what? This conversation sucks. It's hard to have. I really don't want to have this conversation, but you're going to be appreciative that I'm bringing this up to you now because it's going to help you in the long term. You're going to learn a lesson and gain experience from this that's going to help you in the long term. It's going to help you to improve. And the biggest thing here is this prioritizes healthy honesty, which we want to develop in our workplaces. We don't want this fake honesty going on. We don't want everything to be sickeningly sweet in our environments. We want it to be real. And so being nice is all about feeling good in the moment, where being kind really serves the person in the long run. So, what happens if we try to avoid the conversation? This is the typical framework that I see personally in the workplace. Something's going on. An employee has a behavior that needs to be addressed, but the manager doesn't want to address it. So they avoid the conversation, they kind of tiptoe around it. Of course, if we don't deal with it, the issue is going to continue. Frustration starts to build in all sides, not just with the manager and the employee because they're not on the same page, but then others start to notice it, right? When one employee keeps making the same mistakes or has a behavior that is not corrected, others start to notice that resentment starts to build within the team, which can lead into conflicts. Obviously trust declines because the others, they don't think they can trust you because you're not being honest with that person about the mistakes they're making. So why would they trust you about being honest with them? And in the end, the whole conversation gets harder because you let this persist for so long, and now it's not just about you and maybe one person. You've got to get the whole team into a meeting and have a conversation with everyone. And so it's better to just not let this fester. You want to make sure that you are having the conversation as quickly as possible when you see that behavior. We also need to understand that not having that hard conversation is stressful, not just for you as the manager who needs to have the conversation, but not knowing is really stressful for the employee. I mean, think about if you're out at a social function and you get something smeared on your face and nobody tells you. You know, it's always nice to have that one friend that's not afraid to come up to you and be like, hey, you need to clean this up. You look like a hot mess. Did you even look in the mirror? Like, you need that friend that's willing to tell you that so you can get your stuff together. And it might be uncomfortable. And in the moment when your friend tells you that, there's that flash of embarrassment, right? We've all been there. But then it's very quickly over, and we're so thankful that our friend called it out before we continue to walk around the party because we walk around the party and nobody else says anything, and they're kind of giving you those weird looks as you walk around the room. That's super stressful. Why is everyone looking at me like that? What's going on? Did I do something weird? Like, we even do the checklist. Is there something on my face? Because we've all had that kind of feeling, and it's really stressful. It's really uncomfortable. And if it's not addressed, it's prolonged. Same thing happens. Your employee has a behavior, it's not being addressed, and they start to have that build. They can start to feel the frustration from the manager. They start to feel the resentment from maybe their other teammates. And they're in their head going like, am I doing this right? Like, is there a problem? Why are they acting differently towards me? Does everybody know something that I don't? Am I like the butt of the joke? There might be opportunities where they're getting passed up for promotion because this isn't being addressed. And they're wondering, like, hey, why the heck am I being passed up? Why can't I get promoted? Is there something I'm supposed to change? It's super uncomfortable for the employee, too. So it's not just hurting maybe whatever stress you might have, but it's not helping the employee either because they're wandering around trying to figure out what's wrong. What are they doing wrong? So When I said about it not just costing you and the employee, it affects the whole team. Because when that one person's behavior isn't addressed, the rest of the employees, what are they doing? They're picking up the slack for the bad behavior. Maybe they're correcting the mistakes. If it goes on long enough, you might notice other employees start to lower their standards. Well, if they can get away with coming in late all the time, or if they can go get away with that kind of sloppy work, why can't I? Frustration obviously builds. It's perceived as unfairness, which, if you were with me in any of my stress trigger webinars, you know that's a major stress trigger is when we don't feel that we are being all treated fairly or at the same level. That resentment builds, and then that trust in leadership is gone. So, avoiding accountability for one person can start to build an unfairness to everybody else on the team. So, accountability is really an act of respect. I mean, take it back to that example I just gave you with like a friend at a party and you've got something on your face. You are so thankful to have that friend to point out that flaw to you and do it privately, pull you off to the side and say, like, hey, you got to clean this up. And I know when my friend does that, they're doing it because one, they trust that I am capable of hearing it, that I'm not going to like get mad at them for pointing it out. Two, that I'm capable of improving my situation. And three, that they respect me enough to tell me the truth. And that's where you want to get to your employees. That when you have that conversation, they know it's coming from a place of respect. And because you know they're capable of so much more, you're not pulling them into the office to have a hard conversation because you don't like them. It's actually because you respect them, you do like them, and you see great potential in them for improving. So, compassion and accountability are not opposites, they actually work in conjunction with each other. Being clear is an act of kindness. When we give feedback, we want to make sure we approach it with care. We want to approach the person with that respect and positive intent. So, we've all been in a situation where somebody criticizes us and we can kind of tell their intentions are not good, right? I'm one of those people, I learned a trick a while ago that when somebody does that, I immediately ask the question, are you giving me this criticism because you see potential in me and are trying to build me up? Or are you trying to break me down? And it really puts the person on a spot. So if you've got an issue with any workplace bullies or anything and they're doing that to you and they're constantly like kind of criticizing you and you know it's to kind of bring you down or break you down, put them on the spot. Hey, I appreciate that. Are you giving that to me to build me up or break me down? You, as a leader, when you come to your people, they should know you are coming to them to build them up. You're not coming to them to break them down or get them frustrated or feeling like they're not good enough. You're there because you see the potential for them to be so much better. You also need to be clear. Say specifically what needs to be changed and come consistently. Follow through and reinforce the expectations you set. This combination is what creates that compassionate accountability. So when I talk about care, I say start with the person. Don't start with an accusation. We don't want to put anyone on the defensive. So instead of coming at them with this already kind of perceived, assumption that they're just lazy or they don't care about deadlines, you want to approach them on, hey, the last few deadlines I noticed were missed. I'm recognizing a pattern and I just want to understand what's going on. That's not going to put them on the defensive. It's not, hey, you lazy this. Why aren't you getting your stuff done? Or, hey, what's going on? You missed this deadline. That can all be very defensive. Hey, I'm noticing a pattern. You missed a couple of the last deadlines. What's happening? I want you to talk about the behavior. We're not going to assign character. We're going to be compassionate and we're going to be ready to listen with empathy. So we're going to ask the question, what's going on? Help me understand what's happening. Walk me through your process. And then be prepared to listen to understand, not listen to respond. Get clear. When you need to set the expectation and you have this meeting, they shouldn't need a decoder ring to figure out what the heck that meeting was about. It should be extremely clear what we are talking about. It should be direct. So, what specifically happened? And let me also point out, we are not pulling an employee in the office to talk about something they did 6 months ago. This should be done as soon as possible because, again, we're not avoiding it. We are going to face these head on. Then we want to discuss the impact. Why does it matter? A lot of times we kind of skirt over the impact. We'll go to somebody and say, hey, you missed the last two deadlines. I need you to get on it, right? We're not really talking about the impact. Then we need to set a clear expectation. What needs to happen going forward? So, an example of this, the last three supports were submitted after the deadline. That's what specifically happened. That delays the team's ability to complete the client review. That's the impact. Going forward, I need the report submitted by noon on Thursday. There's the expectation. Our brains work so much better when we hear that why. And so we need to get into a habit that when we are having these difficult conversations, we have the why ready to go. Because I have heard so many managers and leaders just go up and say, hey, the last three reports were submitted after the deadline. I need you to get those to me by noon on Thursday. And that's all the more that they give that employee. That why has a great impact, especially it's proven in neuroscience. When we can connect the why, we're more likely to adopt that behavior. Now, the last piece of this is consistency. Okay. One conversation may not be the end of it. We've all had that person where we have trained them, and trained them again, right? One conversation is not going to produce that accountability. You need to follow up. You need to set another meeting with them after you have that conversation and figure out, did that behavior change? Really spend some time reflecting. Did it change? If there was some kind of improvement, reinforce what's working. Give them that process praise. Hey, thanks so much for getting your report to me by noon on Thursday. It was super helpful. We got it out the door on time. The team really appreciated it. Be clear. If there's any hiccups, discuss what happened. We're human. We're flawed. We all have setbacks. We are talking about changing the behavior of an employee. Anytime we try to change a behavior, there's always that initial, go get it. We're on it. We're motivated. Maybe we just had the hard conversation and maybe it's based in fear. Maybe it's based in inspiration, but we're really on it for a while. And then something happens and we miss the deadline again. We fall back into our old habits. Even in the health industry, think about your New Year's resolution. We all hit January 1st. We want to hit it hard, but by February, we've fallen back, to whatever that old habit is we were trying to break. That's why consistency is key. When you see your employees start to slip up and have that reoccurrence, have that hiccup, have another conversation. Maybe it's giving them a new trigger or a cue that they can kind of adopt to develop a new, better habit. Maybe it's relooking at the process. Is there something that continually is setting them into a setback where they're not meeting your expectations? We also need to remember that what leaders consistently tolerate become part of the culture. So if you have that conversation once and the employee's doing really well, but then they start slipping up again and you don't address it, it's now going to become part of the culture. It's kind of like if you put your kid in timeout, they serve their 5 minutes of timeout, and then you're going to let them get out of the corner and go right back to the bad habit they were going into. No, you're going to put them right back in the corner. You're going to select the next level of punishment, whatever that is. You're going to readdress it. It's going to take time to get it through. It's going to take time for them to build that behavior and build up those new good habits you want them to adopt. The big thing is before you go into the conversation, you need to be prepared. So even if something happens, let's say at the 8 a.m. meeting, somebody is interrupting someone else, somebody gives an offhanded remark, somebody's not prepared, whatever it is, you don't need to address it in front of the group and you don't need to address it immediately. You can take a moment, go back to your office, make sure you're emotionally in check because sometimes people do things that get us a little riled up and we need to check ourselves, manage our emotions, and then we need to develop a plan. You should go into that conversation with a clear agenda. You want to make sure you have identified specifically what it is you want to change. Then you need to have the evidence and examples. So if it was, hey, in today's 8 a.m. meeting, you XYZ, have that documented, have it ready to go. Also think about why it mattered. What was the impact it had? Then you need to clearly define, what does good look like going forward? What is the expectation? And you need to have that ready and set so that they know exactly what you are going to be looking for in the future. Then you should be asking, what support do they need? Where did this go off the rails? Why is this behavior coming up? Is there some way that leadership or others can support them to keep this from happening again? And then set a follow up. Hey, let's talk on this again in 2 weeks or next week. Let's follow up on it, whatever that needs to be. So you should have a clear agenda going into that conversation. What specifically needs to change, the evidence, why it matters, the impact, what is the expectation, what support do they need, and when will you follow up? If you've got those 6 things, you are set. So, just as a quick takeaway from today, and I could dive into this so much deeper, but we only have 30 minutes today. When we are nice, we tend to avoid discomfort. When we are kind, we are creating clarity and accountability. That clarity is what's reducing uncertainty, and uncertainty is one of the biggest stress triggers in the workplace. So, anytime we can get clear and just be honest with our people, we are going to promote psychological safety and less stress in the work environment. When we are holding our employees accountable, it creates opportunities for improvement, not just for them, but for everyone. So I want you just to remember that framework. Care plus clarity plus consistency is what gives us that compassionate accountability. So if you do want to go deeper into this, I am happy to take your questions here at the end. I also am willing to jump on a quick call if you want to maybe address something. If you're having an issue with an employee and you just want someone to bounce some ideas off of, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. This is the conversation I want to have. What's the best way to approach it? I'm happy to jump on a call with you and discuss. If this is a training you think some of your managers need, because maybe you've got some people working in your organization that just aren't really good at having those difficult conversations, we can talk about setting up a training for your employees. As I mentioned, I do a free webinar every single week, 30 minutes. So they're quick hits so that you can get back to work. I know we're all super busy. Next week is our wellness webinar, and it's Why Am I So Tired? So the hidden habits that drain our energy, that you are welcome to attend and send invites to anyone on your team. Our next leadership webinar is people pleasing at work, when yes is really a stress response. So we talked a little bit about this in the Don't Push My Buttons webinar on how one of our stress responses is called fawn. So you've heard of fight and flight. There's also freeze and fawn. Some people have heard freeze. Almost no one has heard of the one fawn. And this is where we try to appease the person that's stressing us out, that if we just make them happy, they won't be on our case anymore. And so sometimes we have employees that are working for us that say yes to things, and we think they're really motivated and driven, but what we don't realize is we're actually taking advantage of a stress pattern and we're burning them out. And then we get shocked when that same employee that we could always count on for a yes quits suddenly. So we're going to talk about how to recognize when yes is a stress response, and how we can kind of see our people pleasers and help them from keeping that burnout from happening so that they're not leaving our organizations. So this time I'll open up for questions. The chat is open. You're also able to unmute. If you have not yet connected with me on LinkedIn, please do so. I'm always putting out the advertisements for all the free webinars as well as free downloads and articles. I'd love to connect and share those resources with you. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I know this one was a little quicker than some of our others. Pretty straightforward, but I didn't want to get too deep into it and then go over time. I want to be respectful of your time. So thanks again for joining me. I hope I will see you on the next webinar in 2 weeks. Have a good rest of your afternoon.